Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review The Man Who Fell to Earth. So, this show is to be very scientific. It's to be very heavily on the dialogue. Hence why I only wanted to go on and review the first episode. Because I'm like, man, is there just a lot just to be blah 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 with these characters. And I'm like, man, I don't want to overexhaust myself by even attempting to go into another episode. I want to kind of comb through these through episode to episode. Because these episodes are honestly just like, man, I'm getting a headache from one episode to try to retain all of it and know it all. Especially in the very beginning of this episode, man, is there just a bombardment of just words being spewed out from a guy who is to supposedly call himself Faraday. So this show is to have gone on and been from a book that eventually was adapted to a David Bowie movie. And so now we go on and we, sometime later, are to put this out there as a show that is currently available on Showtime. So with that said, that's how I went on and watched it. If you've never gone on to Showtime before, I would recommend a possible show like Dexter. I know there's like Dexter New Blood on there, but like Dexter is the original iteration of that kind of character. That also is a Showtime show. But yeah, so this show is on Showtime right now, so I decided like, okay, like it seems that every once in a while Showtime is to have a really good show on there, so I figured that this might be it. We'll figure it out when we go along. So, with that said, what is this pilot episode about? So, we have this kind of being like a very like normal kind of alien is to crash land on Earth and is to go on and eventually need to have Faraday go on and try to make it to a certain location to get a message from his mentor, his supposed teacher, Thomas Newton, which that seems to be what the focus of this first episode really is, as well as Faraday going on and trying to learn the English language, going and knowing that there is a certain character that he is to team up with, because it seems out of everyone on planet Earth, it seems there is to be one woman who is to be called Justin Falls, who is to be so much more closer to coming up with solving the equation of energy, or in other words, to save the world. Because we have Faraday, who is to go on and leave his planet, choosing to live or to die, to come here. So, with that said, I know that that's very vague, but within this pilot episode, like really, for me to go on and say anything further would also have me just kind of give away a lot of this stuff, of which that I would have to say in spoilers. So, with that said, I think I'm going to just kind of right there. So we have a moment where Faraday is to also like show us the end in the beginning of his whole journey, but then to harpen back of how he got here. So you're going to see Faraday going on and speaking perfect English and knowing everything about Earth, to the point of him doing some references and stuff like that. And so Faraday is to go on and explain to people why he is to all here, or why he is to be here to save the world and have this supposed device that is to go on and do so. But before that, we have to go on and show Faraday's like early stages of him kind of crash landing on Earth and then going on and meeting people. So that's like the basis of this pilot episode. So I think it's just time for us to go on and double five this bad boy up and just go into spoilers. So besides this being on Showtime, I could probably recommend a number of different apps that I've used over a certain number of time, and here's where they will all be. Going on to a Google search, I can recommend C Movies app. So one of these, C Movies app. You can go on and download this app, and it'll take you to another app that is called Yes Movies, and that's like the updated version of that. And go ahead and download that and be able to kind of see whatever you like, as well as Showtime stuff. You can go on to another app called Fox HD Movies. Regardless of what I say, this might help or hinder you find this app quicker, because the title will say, or the logo will say Fox HD Movies upon the app, but the title will say something different. It'll say Play 1080p HD Movies. Go ahead and find this app, be able to download it, and be able to say that you can see wherever you like. Then this last thing here, 2 words, TV Crush. You can go on and search the word TV Crush, and you'll go on to find that there is a thing of which where TV Crush had technically changed into being called HD Movies 123 Movies, and the logo will have like an HD Movies with a crown off to the side. It's what TV Crush really is now. So, with that said, let's just go into spoilers, because I know that I'm going to probably remember as much as I can about this first pilot episode, because good God, this episode was smothered in dialogue. Just so much dialogue that I'm like, how in the am I supposed to remember like the 28.09 billion numbers? How am I going to remember that as a dialogue? I don't even know how any of these actors were to somehow remember any of this dialogue. They had to have gotten like an earwig in or something, because how could they have remembered that? Because that is crazy to have to consistently keep muttering and remembering. Man, how is it? I don't get it. Hopefully all the rest of the dialogue through the rest of the season is freaking easier than this to remember. Because good God. So, with that said, yeah, let's just go into... so, the grading of this episode... It's fun, but it's a headache. So really, I would go on and just say that it's a good show. It's interesting. I want to see where it goes. So if it seems that people are interested in the show also, I will go further into watching it. Or if not, then eventually, like, I could just say, like, okay, well, I guess this obviously, like... was a thing I saw once. So with that said, I'm going to go on and go into spoilers. Let's double five this bad boy up, because it's about that time to just go into spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this episode. So, in the beginning, we have Faraday, who is to be making it onto this grand stage. And so he is to have this suit, and he is to have this device, and so... Faraday is to kind of have this kind of piece in his ear for him to go ahead and talk to everybody. So Faraday is to mention how is it that we got here, and so Faraday is to go on and say that if we had a number of cosmic choices, like, what would it all look like? Would it look like a staircase? Would it look like a strip of sorts? Um, like, how would that all look when eventually we would see every single decision that we've ever made, or like some kind of timeline? And so Faraday is to go on and say that his choice was very simple when he was to make it onto Earth, because his choice was to live or to die. So he chose to live, so he chose planet Earth. So Faraday was to go on and crash land on planet Earth, and then it seems that he was to get a whole new skin and get a whole new look about him. At some points, we're gonna kind of phase back to what he looked like on his other planet, but I guess now Faraday has to look fairly different now on Earth. So Faraday is to go on and make his way out of the hole that he had created for himself, and is to walk on to make it to this location, this home. And Faraday goes on and is to find this hose, and he is to go on and put this water into his mouth, because I guess Faraday is to really be heavily reliant on water, it seems, to an obscure level. So we have this man who is to see a intruder upon his home, and so he ends up calling the police, so these police end up coming. So all of a sudden we have Faraday, who is naked without clothes on, and he has a hose in his mouth. Now, I mean a hose really in this guy's mouth. And I guess these officers had already arrested some woman. And so we have this officer that's going on and is explaining to Faraday that he's going to pull this hose out of his mouth and then bring him in. And like, hey man, like, don't cause us any trouble or we're going to tase you. So after this officer keeps pulling and pulling and pulling this hose just consistently out of this guy's mouth, we're continuing to pull here. Finally, Faraday, at some point, is to have the end of this hose, and now all of a sudden Faraday is starting to talk to all of these characters. Basically, the only way that he is talking is by repeating what everyone is all saying. So Faraday is to go on and repeat what the officer says, was like, hey, do you want to die? Hey, do you want to die? And so they end up, because this guy ends up like parroting like the bird, everything that everyone is saying. And so they end up just kind of tasering him, and Faraday doesn't go down, and so they end up like tasering him again, and then he finally goes down. So because this guy had no clothes on, when eventually we see him next in this police station, they ended up giving him clothes off of some like dead person, or like maybe there was just clothes in this lost and found in this police station, so they just tossed some sweats on this guy. So we now have Officer K. Faraday, who is to be talking to Faraday. And so the officer is to ask what this guy's name is, and he just repeats what her name is. And so now, hence why we have this guy who is to be called Faraday, because he just stole this name off this woman. And to me, like, this show kind of instantly reminds me of like Starman and like all the other kind of usual like alien kind of movies when all the aliens would have to like learn everything about the Earth, um, or eventually learn their language and so on and so forth. Because eventually these people had to like would have to go on it and figure out things at some point. So it's like, oh, we have the stumbling blocks of this character, so they have to do all these goofy and funny things until they know what's really going on here. So we all of a sudden have Faraday, who is to ask for this bottled water, and he drinks the whole thing down in one gulp. And so we have Faraday who's just consistently wanting water, and so the officer is going and seeing that there is another guy who's going on and talking to his other officer and shouting and saying the F word a lot. And so the officer is to tell Faraday, it's like, well, I guess if you really want something, you gotta really shout about it, and you gotta say the F word a lot. And so Faraday goes on and takes that dialogue and is to go on and use it immediately, where he says F water. And then like the officer is like, whoa, like a little bit rude, are you? Like, hey, like could you be nicer? And so he's like, F fudge water. And then she's like, well, could you say please? And then he's like, please. So we were just having this goofy line of dialogue, and so the more and more that Faraday is to be around people who are talking, and he is hearing every single thing in this room, and when he ends up getting like hit with this salt that is to wake him up, like after he was to go on and get tased. So Faraday is to go on and just repeat every single thing, even to the point of him being able to hear people's phone conversations, and he repeats people's phone conversations back to them, which is really kind of interesting. So the officer is to ask Faraday, it's like, okay, since like it seems like you don't know what your name is, how about you go on and like you tell me if there's somebody that I can contact to get you. And we have Faraday who mentions Justin Falls. So Justin Falls, we end up finding out, is some she of course is a fracker site person. She is to go on and have like certain like masks and stuff like that, and certain like BioWare and hazmats and all that kind of stuff. So whatever fracking sites means, like really to me, like whenever I would hear that word, I would just immediately think of Battlestar Galactica. Uh, but I think I remember like I think fracking sites just is like another term for like it seems like construction worker, it seems, within my brain. But so but I think this has something to do with seeding, because that's what has something to do with IMDb. So we have Justin who, or Justine, is it like, I want to say it's Justin because that's how they pronounce it in the show. So Justin, of course, is to go on and is to go home and find and have this assistant for her father, because her father, of course, is to be very ill, and he, of course, needs special medication that their insurance no longer covers. So Justin needs to go on and find a drug dealer where she can buy this medication off of, so that way Mosa, who is Justin's father, can live what is left of his life without being like in horrible pain, to the point where Justin is getting a call from Mosin asking at some point if she has his medication because his hands are really aching. It must be something to do with eventually him going on and dealing with this illness, so that he is to go through. So we have Mosa and we have Molly, who are kind of reading a book together, and Justin is to just like, wow, like this is kind of nice that we can have like this kind of like happy kind of moment. So Justin is to also go on and try to get more work from her boss, because like with how expensive everything for her father is, and and we of course have it where Justin just like needs some extra shifts, and so her boss is to really just tell her that she's probably going to have to go on and probably do something that she will not do for him, so that way she will get extra shifts. And she, of course, is to not like what this guy has to say, shoves him away, and we, of course, have this boss who is telling her, it's like, dude, you're done. You're freaking out of here. And so Justin is to be so upset at this point, mother effing and all kinds of stuff. And she was to, of course, had this locker where she had all these photos, and she doesn't even recognize who she was anymore because of like how hard she works and how exhausting this is. So Justin is to get this call to report to this police station and meet up with Faraday. So Justin is to meet up with Faraday and is to quote things from Justin's thesis, and is to go on and just kind of quote back all these things that are to have been from some demo tape from somewhere that he had gotten. And Justin's like, are you seriously quoting me back to me? And Faraday's like, yeah. So Faraday is going on and saying that Justin was closer than anybody else ever was to solving the equation of energy, and that if Justin would have went back into school and focused on her thesis, she probably would eventually have figured it out, or at some point, like, she just needed someone else to help her finish this. So Justin is to go on be very weirded out by Faraday, and so she goes on to be like, well, hey, if you ever get close to me or my family again, like, I'll kill you myself. And so Justin walks off thinking that Faraday is some like science stalker, And so Faraday is to now just be told by this officer that, who's also Faraday, that he's eventually going to go on and like get released with this summons. And all of a sudden we have Faraday who ends up going on and breaking his own cuffs, and then is to like eventually go off. So Faraday is to make his way to this pawn shop. So Faraday all of a sudden is to spit out, oddly, all of these gold rings. He's just starting to just blah, 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 out of his mouth as if he's God, what is it? The guy from like the Green Mile coughing, the guy who ends up like taking all the bugs and kind of out of his mouth. Like we had the same thing kind of going on with Faraday, where all of a sudden he's like Sonic and he is like kind of spent all of his rings, and he got like hit and all the rings coming out of his mouth. So Faraday goes into this pawn shop and is to go on and start grabbing these items and just combining them together. And this pawn shop owner is saying like, well, hey, you're going to pay for that, because he basically went on to wreck it. Faraday was to also go on and steal this cell phone from some police officer, and that's how he was able to find this pawn shop. So Faraday goes on and is to deliver all these rings to this woman, and this woman's like, wow, like I get that you must have a tough time at the altar or something like that. Like tough time of getting married, but man, this is a lot. So the girl goes on and is to turn around with an offer of 10 grand, I think. But then Faraday just starts rattling off all these numbers, and we have the woman go up in price, where it's like, well, how about 12.5? And so we just continue to have just Faraday going with all these numbers, 25, this, that. And we have the pawn shop owner that's like, there's no way that I can give you those kinds of numbers. So Faraday just finally settles like, like money, want, give me, need money, give me the money. So the pawn shop owner gives this guy this money, and so with this weird device that Faraday had concocted, which seems like a kind of like a magnet device, like one of those metal detectors, it seems. Like he combines all together this weird goofy device. So Faraday was to mention to Justin that he has to go specifically to this longitude and latitude kind of location. He ends up saying that it's like 28.09 this direction, and minus 9 points, blah, blah, blah. And so he ends up rattling these numbers off consistently. I'm like, God, how can somebody just go on and memorize all that and always get it accurate every single time? Because man, if I were in this role, I would just be like, there is no way I can remember all this. There's no way. It's kind of like House, where eventually the guy who played House was just like, yeah, I somehow retain this stuff, but then anything after me getting the lines out and me being done for that day, it all goes completely out of the window after that, because there's the guy has to really just go on and cram to remember all this stuff, but then eventually he has to kind of quickly forget it because he has to go on to the very next episode, where he has to go and remember all of this all technical stuff within the next episode. So eventually he can't retain it all, and I'm sure for a lot of people it's just like, yeah, like with too much dialogue, like you're gonna go on and eventually not be able to retain what the heck you said 2 episodes ago. So Faraday goes on and is with this device trying to track down this location of where he needs to go. So all of a sudden, Faraday is starting to lose some of his money because I guess Faraday is wherever he's put this money isn't in a place that is to eventually not have the money be falling out. So two men all of a sudden are driving on the side of the road and noticing that this guy is starting to lose money from his pockets and that it's flinging all over the place. And so they drive and are trying to like grab up all the money, and they realize that this guy like is kind of taken off guard, so they jump him and they start beating him up. So Justin is all of a sudden driving by, noticing Faraday getting beaten up by these men. So Justin is to have a gun on her, and so she whips it out in front of these men, and one of the men is to start to wrestle with Justin to try to get this gun away from her. And so Faraday is to pick up the gun and is to start to wildly fire it because he barely can understand how a gun actually works. So these guys finally decide to run off and run away, and that's when Faraday and Justin are to start grabbing this money, well, mostly just Faraday, realizing that the reasoning for these guys trying to jump him is like, oh, they were after the money? And Justin's like, well, yeah, I guess that was the case. So because Justin was to go on and find on her windshield a $50 bill. She's like, wait a minute, what? Huh? Like, and the funny thing is she tried to touch the windshield trying to grab the money, but realized that windshield. So that was kind of dumb. But so Justin is to grab the gun away from Faraday, and so we again have Faraday that is telling Justin like about this mission and what like Faraday wants Justin to do, that both of them have to come together and do this mission. And Justin's like, no, like I have family, I have this, I have that, like. And Faraday is going on and counting the number of hours, the number of minutes, the number of seconds that he needs to go on and get to this message. And so Justin is to go on and take Faraday's money so that way she can afford her father's drugs. Because eventually, while Justin and Faraday are in this truck together, and at some point Faraday falls asleep, Justin is taking this call from her father talking about the medication. And so Faraday at one point is going on and asking Justin, it's like, well, hey, like, when is your father going to die? So, like, as if they know the exact date of when it's actually going to happen. So Faraday and Justin make it to this restaurant where there seems to be some cops in there. So Justin and this dealer have to go on and do this kind of creative way to get this medication while they're by this phone. So Faraday is to go on and say that that Faraday is not wasting Justin's time, that Justin is wasting his time because they only have a certain number of hours, certain amount of minutes, certain amount of seconds. To where he goes on and he's counting down the seconds at some point. So Faraday is to mention that he was here to meet up with his teacher, who is a guy named Thomas Newton. And so Justin goes and Googles this guy, Thomas Jerome Newton, and is to find out that he is the former owner, or the owner of World Enterprises. And so Justin is telling like Faraday, it's like, seriously, you know this guy? But not only that, we have Faraday that writes out Justin's equation and then is to go on and solve it. And so Justin's like, wait a minute, like, you know, like the finishing up of the equation, like, you know, like base 80 or something like that is what she 60 or 80 or something like that. I think she ends up saying 80. Maybe it was 60. I don't remember. It's one of those. So Justin is to realize that this guy is somehow smart, and he was to figure out this kind of equation. So what happens here is that Faraday is to go on and drink this water, and then he drops it on the ground as if he's like Thor. He's like, I want to have another, and then smashes the glass. So Faraday then goes on and gets another glass of water, and so Justin is starting to realize that kind of Faraday is causing a scene here. And so, like, Justin is trying to wrangle in Faraday. So we have Justin who goes on and takes Faraday to this certain specific location. And so Justin doesn't want Faraday to go to this certain location because it's like, well, it seems kind of very deserted. Like, aren't you sure you want to not, like, can I take you to a hotel or some other kind of place? And Faraday's like, no, like I won't be here for very long because I won't be here when, like, at night when this place gets cold. So Faraday is to walk further and further into this location, and this location is to lead him to go into this tornado. So Justin is consistently tempted to drive away from Faraday or to go on and do what she's to need to do. But then again, she turns around and she's like, no, like, I gotta protect this guy because it seems like this guy doesn't seem like he's all there. So Justin is to go back to where Faraday is and is to realize that Faraday is going right into the eye of the tornado, or the eye of the storm, supposedly. So, for those of you who are to go on and see movies like Twister and stuff like that, like the eye of the storm, the eye of the tornado. I don't know exactly the perfect terminology, but like with all the sciencey stuff that they go on and have to spout throughout this whole entire freaking episode, things are gonna get lost in scientific dumb guy, which is me, translation. So Faraday goes into this tornado and goes into the middle of it, and then all of a sudden is to be teleported to this forest of sorts, or this jungle of sorts. And Faraday is to go on and have these eyes that are kind of different than his normal eyes, his alien eyes. We also had a moment when Faraday was to go on and be using that device, and Faraday was to get a flashback of him being on his home planet and like possibly seeing a structure that was on his home planet fall and crumble, probably telling him that he needed to get the heck out of there. Kind of reflecting on the destruction of his possible home planet. So Faraday was to meet up with Thomas Newton, and so Thomas Newton was to tell Faraday it's about effing time, and that Newton is to tell Faraday that he's going to make him a god that these people can't ignore. So we go on and have them meet together, and so really this is all to eventually lead that Faraday is going to give people this device to help them be able to save their planet and possibly more. Who knows? Eventually, we'll get there within these episodes to see what all is to happen within these things. But with that said, man, 50 some odd minute show, 40-minute review. Because, yeah, there is a lot within this one, but a lot of times I would really get very close to the amount of minutes that a show would take anyways. But this one, yeah, definitely I knew that I'm like, this is going to take me a million years to talk about one episode. So I thought that I'm like, I'm going to pull back and kind of do this per episode to episode because there's a lot to digest within this thing. So with that said, hopefully I covered somewhere close to this episode, because really I would just say this is gonna have to be as good as freaking enough. So yeah. So we also had a moment where Faraday and Justin were to make it to this gas station, because of course Faraday was complaining to Justin about, hey, like, why have we stopped? And Justin is saying, it's like, well, we needed gas. And Faraday's like, oh, okay. So Faraday dunks himself into this cooler, and the one guy's like, hey, is he like gonna kill himself? And the girl's like, I don't know, like, whatever. Just so the guy is to kind of like just kind of shake him and just like, hey man, you can't do that. And Faraday is asking this guy, hey, can I buy this? Can I buy this cooler? And he's like, sure. So Justin is to go on and get herself some Snickers and all kinds of things. So Justin is to make his way over to this fence where there's a guy who is to train these horses. And so, horrifically, we had a scene in here where supposedly the guy, when like they can't really use them for anything, they go and they play like this paintball game with them where they have the horses kind of crazily go around and they hit them with paintballs. And we have Faraday that's telling this guy, it's like, well, that's not what these animals are for. And going on and just kind of talking about these animals and so on and so forth. So we also had, of course, where Faraday was talking to Justin about the way that his world works and how there are some people that build things and like kind of do the science and the math behind everything, and there's certain people that are like the drones and they go out and they actually do the missions. And so there's kind of like these two different kind of factions of this alien race. And I think the aliens are to call themselves the Anthians. The Anthians, I believe that's how it's pronounced. It when I saw it on subtitled, I was like, okay, like this looks very weird. But I'm hoping it's correct when I say the Anthians. Because that pronunciation was kind of weird. Plus the way it broke it down in subtitles was also kind of weird. So yeah. So hopefully, like I got the drones part right, but I didn't know about the other part, but like what would they call it? But there's just a lot of dialogue in this episode. There's too much to all retain, unless you're just really good at retaining dialogue, and I'm not. So with that said, I think I'm just gonna get out of here so I can kind of beat the time of how long this has to take. So that's it. If I had forgotten anything, I'll probably go on and rebuttal it via the next episode. Justin was to go on and hide in her car by the time that tornado happened. She was to just go on and lay down in her car and hope that everything was going to go okay. Probably at some point, I'm sure her car was to possibly get picked up and probably flung around or something. So we'll see what happens with Justin in the next episode. So yeah, with that said, I think that's everything. Hopefully, somewhere ballparkingly close. But with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Cause man, I'm just so leery about the whole like technical side of the show, this episode, and so with that said, I'm just gonna take every attempt to try to do my best. But really, also, who knows if this will lead to be interesting to people? The show is to be really interesting to people, and so either way, I'll just say goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.